Hill with Red Transit Consultants, and I think most people on here know me, but just brief background. I've been in civil 3D for civil design industry for about 20 years, and started writing a lot of apps for civil 3D probably close to 10 years ago. I'm losing track of time when when I got into the .NET side, but I still do civil design now, and but here and there, but more so custom programming and app development has been a big part of my day now. Um, do all sorts of customization um, with it. So um, yeah, so with what we're going to talk about today is the new tool that we've rolled out called lot grading tools for civil 3D and for subdivision design. And Landon Messal with Seaman Whiteside contacted me. I don't know what was landed a few years ago, probably, I think. And we got into doing some custom programming there. And Landon had this idea of grading lots. They had quite a few subdivisions they were doing specific to some of their clients and whatnot. And so we were able to automate an app that would automate the grading of feature lines, which helped in with I think it was 2019 they came out finally with the .NET feature line API that we could edit the feature line elevations that way. So so we've got this app up and running, and I mentioned to Landon that this could be very helpful across the industry for anybody doing lot grading. And we've been working this year after rolling it out, as working with a few of you in the Austin area, helping to offer some guidelines into where we should go next with it. And so we'll talk about that at the end. But Landon's going to do the brunt of the presentation, just because he's sort of the brains behind this and how it was set up to work. And then I'll chime in with some of the coding and things like that, settings and the nitty gritty stuff as we get into it. But Landon, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can chime in. And
all right, guys. So I'll kick this off with just a PowerPoint to hopefully keep me in check here. And as Steve said, we have, hold on a second here. See if we get that out there. There we go. So I teamed up with Steve. I had come across Red Transit through some of the tools that Steve had already created, one of which was pipe network tools. And if any of you are unfamiliar with that, I can't express enough how absolutely valuable his pipe network tools are. And to the point where I think even what Autodesk just rolled out with the Project Explorer that they acquired from 3AM Solutions really still falls short of what Steve has in that suite of pipe productivity tools. So definitely go and look at that. But that's how I found Red Transit. I didn't know Steve prior to this. And as we had kind of conversations over the years, I had approached him about potentially solving some of our redundant processes. And we do a lot of residential, single family residential down here in the Southeast. And so we felt like that was something. I wasn't even aware that the API wasn't available until 2019. So it sounds like it was kind of serendipitous as that idea was coming to fruition. We had just moved into 2019. So, here's, this is Steve and I don't know, again, he's introduced himself, runs a fantastic consulting firm. I'm a licensed engineer and with a really fancy title of CAD systems integration engineer. I just always, in my position, trying to get these disparate programs to talk to each other, not too dissimilar to what Adam's doing with Dynamo, just trying to automate so many redundant processes in the firm. So, again, like I mentioned, you all go to Red Transit's website, and this is worth its meat right here. Is worth every penny of it. Pipe Network Productivity Tools. He's got some really good stuff in there. So just a real quick overview of what we're going to go over today. We've got a lot grading tool. This is a 1-minute clip, and I'll kind of go through and show you what this whole thing does, and then we'll get a little bit more granular into that process. So we happen to use corridor surfaces. If you use your right-of-way surfaces of feature line, however you create your roadway surfaces will work. We've got some lot grader settings that allow you to set the high points in the swales, do some slope checking in the back, set your pad elevations off of those high points. You've got the ability to create a reveal or back patios, if you will, and then automatically add those feature lines after you swipe through the lots to the surface. And what you're seeing here, if any of you guys do single family residential, that's an extremely repetitive process, going back and forth and checking to see, which lot was the high lot there. So, so let's get into the tool that we've created so far. This is currently is our ribbon. And we're going to start off with the settings before we get into actually grading some lots here. So in our current settings menu, I want to go over some terminology first. We talk a lot about A, B, and C points on the lot line. And we've got a schematic over here on the left-hand side, where we're calling out A is at the right of way, B is at some point that you will specify, and C is at the back of the lot. And, this schematic over here on the right happens to be a National Home Builders kind of grading standards. Some of you might think this is familiar, but again, here we are. Here's A in a typical type B drainage. Drainage. A is at the right of way. B is usually the high point somewhere at the midpoint of the lot, and then C is all the way at the back of the property line. So looking into these settings here, we've got the ability to either add a high point for type B grading, or if we needed to do a straight grade from front to back when the rear grading scenario is steep enough that we're flowing water in one direction. We can automatically remove existing PIs, or we can leave them there if we had manually added them. And then we've got a reporting console that will help you troubleshoot, maybe calculations that it helps you track to see what the calculation was executing, just to provide a bit more confidence in the solution. So today I'm going to focus primarily on type B grading. That's the typical midpoint. There's a high point at the midpoint of the lot. So right here, we can set the high point of location B if we choose to add that in. We can set the distance if it's like a front loaded single family lot where all the houses are 20 foot set back from the right of way. We can specify that distance, or we can simply choose the midpoint of the lot. We can, that's the location to B, sorry, the elevation of B, you can set either through a grade. In this example here, we're setting it at just 1% from the right of way up to the high point. Some of the home builders want the pad to be a foot above the back of curb. So you can do a bit of math here to just set elevation to B from an elevation difference. If you yourself or your team leader, project manager likes your elevations to be rounded, we have provided that. So you can round them off to 500ths or 10s, 15s, and whatnot. We can then go and start to address how we're going to deal with the elevation on the back of the property line. So sometimes we've already graded the back of the lot or at least initially graded it if there's a swale present. But in instances where we've got some flexibility on what the elevation of C is, we can calculate C. If we do decide to hold C here, where this is like, we're tying into existing grade, we do have the ability to come back and check my resulting slope from C to B, just to ensure that setting the elevation of B isn't violating any minimum slopes on the lot line. We can then go and set the mode of the pad. So which one of these points on the lot line is going to dictate the pad elevation? We can set the offset value of that. So we're doing a 1/2 foot above the highest D elevation in this example here. And again, we've got the ability to round the pad elevation as well. The pad reveal setting was really kind of born out of a need for a client was creating like a false front to create stairs coming into the house. The client called it a reveal. And so as we were building this, we decided to call this a reveal. It can be used in a lot of different ways, whether you're revealing the front or not. This allows you to essentially offset the pad and then set offset distances and then elevation differences. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail in a second. Up here is the feature line search options. It's just giving us what we're doing here is setting the feature lines that this lot grader tool is going to look for as we swipe through the lots. And then down here at the end, we have the ability to automatically add the lot lines, the building pads, and the building reveals or the pad reveals to a selected surface to a selected surface automatically. All right, so let's go see this thing in action. So just as just to give you an idea of how fast this tool can be, this is I think this was like 85 lots. It's a real project that we were working on, and an engineer had already graded this kind of manually with just quick elevation editor and feature lines like we had typically been doing. And I think it might have taken her I think a good part of a full day to get this kind of roughly graded, where she had pads, elevations kind of set, generally speaking. This was, for some reason or another, this was the project I chose. It was just right there when we were working through this, and I graded this thing, rough graded, like through, it wasn't fine graded. There were some things from ties and stuff that we needed to do here, but I did it in less than 5 minutes. And so really from creating efficiencies and maybe in allowing us to review the project longer, at a longer period of time, as opposed to just grinding through redundant work, it can be a really valuable tool. So in this case here, guys, we do have a corridor surface, and the corridor surface typically for us ends at the right of way. We build our corridors right away to right of way, whether you guys are using feature lines or however you're creating your road surface, this tool will work. In this case, our lot lines, which we ultimately turn into feature lines. These are all feature lines in this file now, but we're essentially just copying in our geometry and then creating feature lines out of them to prep that line work to be ready for this tool. We also have pads set as feature lines as well. And these pads, can vary in size. They do need to be rectangular. There's no curved pads. But they could vary according to the client's product requirements. All right, so here's our our lot grader ribbon, and we'll go in and start creating some settings in here. So we are gonna, in this case, do a high point. This particular client had, or this particular project rather, was a front-loaded product, and I think we were 30 feet off of the right-of-way, and they had an elevation difference that they were wanting off of the back of the right-of-way. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to say we're going to go up 1.5% from the right-of-way to set the elevation of B. Now, something that I just skipped over here is what is setting the elevation of A. And we do have plans to allow you to automatically set that off of a surface. But prior to, when we were prepping our line work, we select all of our polylines and we go through the, typical command of create feature line from object. And in doing that, we are assigning the feature lines to the corridor surface. And so what we'll end up getting is we'll get a message that says the corridor surface does not exist out on this back lot, right? I mean, the corridor is being clipped right at the right of way. So the front of the pad, rather the front of the feature line, which is going to become what we refer to as point A, is relative to the corridor surface or to the right of way surface, 0 feet. That way, if we make vertical profile changes, the corridor updates, my front of my pad or front of my lot line is always on, dynamically linked to the corridor surface. So that is the case for all of these lot lines. I was at an AU event and this guy was doing residential grading, and he sets all of his pad elevations to 0 just so he knows what he's graded and what he hasn't. I think that would probably be, it works for us because our elevations in the low country are like 8. But if you're in the thousands, I'd imagine you'd want to just be maybe 10 feet below what you expect them to be. That'd be quite a hole for the surface to generate. But again, other than the elevation of A, to use the lot grading tool, that's really kind of all you need. Now, in the back, in this particular project, this was the property line. In the back of these lots, we're going to have a ditch, a swale running through the back of them that was tying to the existing grade. So this would be a scenario here where we might want to go in and grade the rear of the lot first, where we would end up using, wanting to hold point C. All right, apologize for skipping over that. So go back to our lot grader tool. We'll go back into the settings. Once you execute this, it will remember your settings, so you won't have to come back through here. I had canceled out of that command, which is probably, so I don't forget about it at the end. One of the things that coming in the future update is the ability to save settings according to like client needs. So you can just go in and say, hey, Mungo Homes type B grading, slide it in, and then you have at least a good starting point. But in this case here, I'm going to grade up 1.5%. I'm going to calculate C, and I'm going to set the elevation of my pad off of elevation B. I'm going to, the elevation difference, Siemens Whiteside standard here, is to have a 1/2 foot difference between the pad and the highest of the 2 high points of the swale. This client wanted was wanting to build patios on the back of the house, and so they required the first 15 feet behind the property to be, or behind the pad to be at like 5%. So we can accomplish that through the reveal. In this case, I'm going to offset the front of my reveal is going to be offset from the pad, some nominal distance, 0.1, and then, kind of using that AutoCAD trick of, using infinitely small numbers to be 0. I'm going to set the pad elevation difference to negative 0.001 here, because I'm not really chasing any type of feature line reveal in the front. However, in the back, I'm going to offset the back of the pad 15 feet, and I'm going to come down a half a foot over 15 feet. Doing the same thing on the sides here, we are going to offset a nominal amount, 0.1, and the elevation difference is negative 0.1. In here is where we can select from feature lines that are already in the file, feature line styles that are already in the file. And we are letting the tool or telling the tool what feature lines to look for as we swipe through the lots. Again, these can be your own company's, custom feature line styles. You can use the ones we give you, whatever you need there. And then we can add those feature lines automatically. So these 3 feature line styles will automatically be added to the finished grade surface. We'll click apply, and then we go into the lot grader itself. The lot grader is simply a fence selection. And so it needs an odd number. When you swipe through, it needs an odd number of feature lines, right? So 1, 2 is the pad, and 3 is the next lot line. And you can click inside. Inside it doesn't always have to be a straight line, but you can go around curves if you want. And once you're done swiping through, you hit enter, and you'll see that the lot grader is going through and iterating through each one of those pads. It has offset, and this is the reveal. You can see we've got a 15-foot offset in the back, and it has automatically added those feature lines to our surface. Now, this is flipping a surface on a presentation. I don't know. Let's see if we can make that happen. But you can see here, in this case, it adds all of the feature lines that are on that particular style when you swipe through it. And so that's why, in this file, I had already had the lot lines and the pads and everything already set on that style. When you initially swipe through a file, that may not be the case, but you can see here that my pads for these hadn't been set or graded yet. Those are just straight elevations through. And the pads right here have a high point right here in the front, 30 feet off of the right of way. We're setting a high point, and then we're coming back down.
Hey, Landon.
Yes, sir.
Can I chime in and just mention how that the feature line styles work?
Absolutely.
So the initial setting that's there for those styles, you can have your lot lines and pads at any style. It doesn't matter. You swipe through a feature line, it's going to try to grade it as long as there's an odd number. But ultimately, what we needed to do was, if a user, graded the lots and then wanted to come back and make modifications. So, let's go through an exercise of doing that. Maybe you change, one of your parameters here that you don't like how that graded out. So we make some adjustments here, and then we go back and re-swipe through those exact same lots. We needed a way to find those same feature lines again. So the reveal needed to be deleted, and you saw that delete right there. And now it's re-adding the reveal. So we needed styles in there to differentiate. So as it runs, what it's going to do is it's technically on the second time, it's looking for feature lines on those styles and is able to remove them from the fence selection because they're on that specific style. You can swipe through on any style, and it's going to apply those styles to those feature lines so that future uses of it work appropriately. And then also the adding to the surface, we needed to be able to grab those by a style. And Landon, if you can click on the FG surface and go to the surface definition. think it's nice to point this out, how clean it comes out as well. You know, it's adding as brake lines for you, and it's noted in the description that it's coming from the lot grader. It's the lot lines, the pads, and the pad reveals. And those brake line groups, if they're in the surface, those brake line groups will be found and removed and then replaced when it rebuilds.
I've always thought that the operation order is sometimes it's kind of like hitting a moving target. I've had a ton of success using this lot grading tool with having that corridor surface pasted first, or rather the lot grader, it would be the lot lines pasted first, and then the corridor comes in after it to then depress the finished grade surface. There's only been, I think, one scenario where the geometry of the site was setting up such that when I was swiping through using the lot grader settings, it was actually, I needed to not take all the feature lines out and back in. And so, and that's usually after you've been grading for a bit. And so those feature lines were already really part of the surface set or surface definition. And so we have the ability to not automatically add those feature lines to the finished grade. And so I can go through and click apply, and I can still swipe through here and it just redo everything and still update my surface, but not take all the definitions out and back in. So when you get down there right before submittal and you've got the surface right where you need it, and you don't want to mess with like the surface definitions itself, you just want to re-swipe through that lot. We still have that ability to do that. You guys might have noticed there, I had put a percent grade of 30% up here, made some peaks in there in the feature lines. And just a really easy, you can really quickly just go back and fix either mistakes or try multiple iterations of different designs if you do have that flexibility from with the client. Does anybody have any questions right now? One of the things that, and we've got documentation that would obviously, or would certainly, let's go ahead and put this guy rebuild. Documentation that dives into this a bit deeper. But one of the things that might not be obvious to you all is, well, what is setting the front of the lot when you're swiping through? And what we've chosen is you swipe through the half that you swipe through is what is setting the front or is associating the point on the feature line as point A. So if I had swiped through the front on this side right here, if I had swiped on this side of the midpoint, then this would have been point A right here. For the corner lots here, while I've got them on my screen here, one thing that might be obvious is that I don't have a lot line feature line just sitting right here to swipe through. And so there's a couple ways to handle this. Sometimes I'll just simply create a feature line and place it out here, very close to the edge of the. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and pull it off of that. Yeah, sure. And I'm just setting it to the corridor surface and hit enter. And it's just a dummy feature line to allow me to then swipe through. Let me just check this elevation. So yeah, they're both on the surface there. So now I can just simply go through here and use that setting and swipe through, and it gives me a feature line to then query the 2B elevations. And to Steve's point earlier, you notice that my feature line was green. It was a different style. It's kind of my default grading style. And I swiped through and it changed the feature line style to what we had specified in that setting. Right through here. So if I had, if we go through here and got this rear feature line, rear lot line, if you will, we open up our elevation editor, and I was gonna, if this was an actual working file, I would have had this rear feature line. I'd have these 2 points, the beginning and end, set relative to the corridor surface, or right of way comes up to, you know, or rather our corridor comes up to this right of way. So now I know I've got this connection of this rear feature line to the corridor. And let's just pretend we're going to grade in a rear yard swale here. And I'm going to accept that elevation. One of my newer tools that I start to use, one of the native tools that I've just started to use is what I meant to say. And so we're going to come down at -1% here, and I'll do it again. So we're just grading the rear lot. I'm going to accept that elevation. We'll come back over to here. We'll accept that elevation. It's -6.2. That's greater than our minimum of 0.5%. And so now I want to hold my rear lots here. I've already engineered the elevation C, the rear of the lot. And in my lot grader settings, I'm going to hold elevation C here, okay? So we'll come back up at 2% here. We're going to hold the elevation of C. And I want to make sure that when I'm grading up and setting my high point, that I'm not violating a minimum slope from C to B. So we can set that minimum slope. My firm's is 1%. We can select elevation to B here. This is type B grading. If we were doing some front to back type A or type C grading, we could select a different PI elevation on the feature line to set the pad. We'll stick with this. Go ahead and round it up. And we'll take the, I'll leave it. That's fine. All right, click apply. I think I already deleted that feature line on the corner. No worries, I'll just swipe through here and do these lots here. All right. So as one could imagine, with just showing you this, I could probably do this in the background while Steve's talking in the future here, and knock this thing out very quickly, at least preliminarily, to the point where I can then print it and then, you know, sit down at a table with the PM and discuss with them, you know, hey, where, you know, what are we missing here? Are our flood elevations all being met? You know, how did that tying into this grand tree that's over in here? Can we make that happen with this road elevation? And inevitably, the client wants to change his product size, or, you know, elevation, road elevations change, and you've got to go back and do rework. And I think this really presents an opportunity to do that rework a lot faster. And, you know, depending on how you write your contracts, maybe that's additional services that you're making, you know, doubling down on. So one of the things that is just painfully more so than really, maybe not more so than grading individual lots, but one thing that's really painful is labeling lots. You know, the elevation of the high points, the slopes along each of the lot lines. That can be pretty cumbersome. So one of the natural questions with Steve was, well, can you label this thing for me? Because I'm sick of doing that. And so he's super talented, and he knocked it out of the park. So we added into this a lot labeler, and you can label the current drawing. I tend to use label the current drawing and then put those labels kind of like on a no plot. So it is just a immediate kind of reference to, like, did I accomplish what I'm trying to do for review purposes. Our company's workflow is to label in the sheet. So we would data reference that finished grade surface into the grading plan, and then we can label that sheet through this lot labeler. For the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to label it inside this file. But here we are, we're selecting, we're specifying what lot lines are going to be labeled, what to look for. We're going to specify the pad, feature line style. And if we choose to label the pad reveal, which we did on a project where we were pushing down, like I said before, we were falsely pushing the front of the house down so we could have steps. We needed to label that for the client. So you do have that option. In this case, I'm going to label the lot line, and I'm just going to say that is, we'll do elevation only, and you can set your spot marker style, and then we can set the slope along the lot line as well. So we'll do percent. One of the nice things about this too is it'll label your pad centers. So we'll just call this elevation, and we'll do no markers. The surface that you need to label is selectable here. Can't forget that. And we're going to label the finished grid surface. We'll click OK. And you can see this thing running through. I'm telling you, when we made this thing, I mean, it was just, their minds were blown. You're seeing a little bit of some labeling that's going on in here because the styles weren't set correctly in the back of these lots. So it's labeling some of these way down in here, every time there's a PI. But I think you guys will get the point here. So this usually, if I had had the feature line style set up correctly there, it would only take a few seconds here. But you can see that we've placed a elevation point at the A point on the front of the lot line. We're labeling the slope from B to A. Labeling the high point here. The slope back from B to C, and then the elevation to C. So you notice that these feature lines did not get labeled, and that was because they were not on the style that I had set up there in the lot labeler here. And the mistake I made was that some of these feature lines were on the wrong style. It's a byproduct of a test file here, but it will only label you would set feature lines styles accordingly to how they're going to be labeled. That's what I was trying to say.
Hey, Landon, why don't you just for kicks here real quick, take one of those feature lines on the rear, or grab all the rear feature lines and set them on a different style. And if you rerun the tool, you don't have to delete the labels. It'll do it.
Oh, I got you.
That's what I'm trying to demonstrate, is that if you just change the feature line style and then rerun the lot labeler the way you've got it and just let that process. What's happening here is we've added the ability for Civil 3D to recognize that those labels were created by the lot labeler tool. And so if you had added your own labels in manually, they won't get removed because they're not going to have the data on it that recognizes that they were created by the lot labeler. So why don't once you run it, so you saw all the labels disappear and then it re-adds. So it's pretty simple once you do it. If you found a mistake like that, it's just a matter of changing some styles around, rerun the tool. It deletes all the labels, re-adds them back in, and will not delete your labels that you've added manually. So
I think one of the things that would like to, one of the issues when you add surface labels that I haven't really been able to overcome is in the object layer settings inside of your templates. When it comes to a surface label, you can only specify one layer. And one of the things that some of our engineers struggle with is wanting to just select certain types of labels, such as all the pads. And of course, object or quick select doesn't filter through the style like it should. And it's kind of a pain in the rear. So one of the things that we have the ability to do when we plan to phase in is setting these labels on a layer to allow you a bit more control when layer control inside of your plans. So I think, I mean, if you think about something like this, is someone manually going in and adding those elevations, as redundant as that seems, like, you know, maybe that only takes an hour and a half, but that's right there, that's an hour and 29 minutes and 30 seconds to get back. So really, really valuable tool there in the lot labeler. Does anybody, before I move off of out of AutoCAD here, does anybody have any questions or something they'd like to see?
I wanted to add one thing too, Landon, before we get into too many questions. Go back into the lot labeler if you can, real quick. So we didn't really hit on it, but the additional drawings to label, that's an important part there, because a lot of times, you know, what we're doing from the civil side is we set up our sheets, and you know, so we data reference in our surfaces into our sheets. It will not work from an XREF surface. That is not there yet. I'm hoping to get that there at some point, but right now the surface does have to be data referenced into your sheets. But then you could just, the feature lines don't have to be in there. What you would do is be in your grading file with all your feature lines, and then you would have, you'd load in your sheets into this list. And then it's going to look at your grading file here and figure out the coordinates for all these points where everything's going to be. And it will add these surface labels into your sheets then. So you actually don't have to have the lot lines in your sheet files. All you need is the surface, because that's what you're labeling here is the surface. Originally, when we were writing this lot labeler, we wanted it to label the actual feature lines, but you know, Civil 3D and the APIs that they offer, there's not an API to label the feature lines. It just wasn't built out. So went a different route with it, and we're just using the coordinates of the feature lines of where things are for the PI points, elevation points, that kind of stuff, and logging all that data and then adding it to it. So that's really a huge feature to label your sheets this way too. So.
And you know, Steve, I don't know if I've asked you this question, but I think I think we've used it this way. We do a lot of multi-phase developments where we're doing, you know, 5-6 phases of a residential neighborhood, and it's not. We've gone and labeled a different surface. It doesn't have to be the finished grade, the same exact surface. I don't think, Steve.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so we've graded out, say the client wants to permit 2 phases, right, as one. So we just grade it all out together. And then from a permitting standpoint or construction drawing standpoint, we then need to take that master finished grade surface and clip it per phase, and we've labeled the phased finished grade as opposed to the actual.
Yeah, that's a good point, because every drawing you add into this drawings to label list has the option to what surfaces are available in that drawing. When you add it to the list, it's going to pull the surfaces that are in that drawing and show you, and then you get the option to choose which ones you want to label that are in that file. And then if the point falls on the surface, it labels it. If it doesn't fall on the surface, there's no label that gets generated. So.
All right, that's from a lot grading tool, you know, kind of quick introduction to you all. That's what I've got. If anybody, we do have another feature I kind of glossed over, didn't touch on, but was update surface. And Steve, if you could kind of expand on that.
Yeah, the update surface is just if you want to force a, maybe you want to do all your grading and not add them to the surface and have to go back and forth with that time process. You could have that unchecked, and then the update surface will essentially execute that for you. So it looks at the surface that you have selected and from your settings, and it removes any of those break lines groups that might be in it, and then finds all the feature lines and adds them back to it. So it's just it's just that little add surface box on the settings tab. It essentially executes that same thing, just externally from a separate command. So, Landon, do you want to jump over to the PowerPoint and we can talk about some of the new features coming and licensing and all that?
Sure thing. All right. So, hooray, AutoCAD did not crash. Yeah, go ahead, Steve, take it from you.
Yeah, so in regards to licensing and installation is really simple. If you've used, the pipe network productivity tools or any of the other stuff we have out there, it's using FlexEra licensing. So it is, similar to what Autodesk has, where your license file is good through a certain time period. It's pretty simple installation. It's just an MSI file. It takes a couple minutes to install. Any user can really install it. It just drops a bundle folder into the Autodesk applications folder directory, and then the ribbon will appear for your users. So from an IT standpoint, it's really simple to push out, or if somebody needs an app, they can just add it real quick. Then licensing, you can either get a standalone license where we use the physical address and computer name and create a license file that you would just store on the machine. You'll get a FlexEra dialog upon running the command, and it allows for pointing to the license file, or the network licensing option where the license resides on the server and it can be shared among a multitude of computers. Just can't be used at the same time. So when you run the tool, it pulls the license off the server and it's now on that machine until Civil 3D is closed out. And so that's the release mechanism, is closing of Civil 3D. We do have capabilities of borrowing licenses and things like that as well, that are included in the installer package. So I probably need to add that onto this ribbon, but some of the other tools I've got that added in there. Pricing listed on here is $600 a year is the subscription fee, or if you just need it for a month or something, $100 a month. But the time savings is tremendous. So you want to go to the next slide? So some of the new features that we're in the middle of working out here, Landon kind of talked about it briefly, the elevation of A. Currently, the way what we demonstrated here is you have elevation of A already set, but we're adding the option in there to set the elevation of A. Either use the feature line's A elevation as it where you swipe through is going to determine that, right, closer to the right of way, or you can designate the surface and what gets set. Now, what I can't do right now, because there's no API for it, is changing the feature line to automatically be relative to the surface. That's a fairly new feature in Civil 3D, but they haven't given us the API access to set that point to be relative. But it will check to see if the point is on the surface and inherit the surface elevation if needed. Then the other items that we're working on, thanks to some of you in the Austin user group pointed out to us a while back, this is really great tool for type B lot grading. As Landon pointed out, that you can get type A and type C to work out pretty well, but we're working on adding some better tools with that. So if you see the ribbon down below, we're building in specific grading commands and setting dialogues for type A, type B, and type C grading to just make it a little bit easier based off of this diagram to the right-hand side. We're adding the options in there to insert points, what we're calling D and E. D being between A and B at the front of the lot, and E being on the back of the lot. That will help you all to add, front swales or rear swales, your high and low points there, where necessary. And, essentially give you that ability to do a type C pad grading, similarly where you just swiping through and it does it. Then we're also adding the checking the results to comply with the International Building Code, and that option will be to verify that between the pad and the side of the lot meets a certain elevation difference in the building code. I believe it's set to a half a foot. Correct me if I'm wrong, Landon. And then something with I can't remember off the top of my head, but we're adding in the all the language from the International Building Code to check that distance for you and check the grade to make sure that that pad design complies with that.
It's 5% over the first 10 feet.
Yes, that's what it is. And so that will be in there as well to help guide you and make sure you're meeting those requirements. And it'll just be a checkbox if you want to turn it on or off too. So yeah, that's what we have. So if y'all have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask away.
I just had a question on the labeling. When you change your surface and rebuild it, do those labels automatically update, or do you have to go in there and just run the labeler again on it?
So if your surface changes, they're just surface. They're what is placing our Civil 3D surface labels. So they're dynamic already in themselves. So there's no need to replace the labels.
Okay. Great.
And again, if you label your sheets with this tool and, you've got your surface passing through as a data reference, and then you go back and make some lot grading changes, there's no need to relabel. But, the time to execute for relabeling is pretty quick. You saw once we fix some of those feature line issues, it's really pretty quick. And, if you need to do it, you can add in those sheets back in and it'll remove them. It'll open the sheets on the back end, remove the labels, re-add them for you. So the only thing that if you do make some adjustments to the labels as far as like the drag state and things like that, and then you remove or rerun the tool, the drag state would be then lost at that point. I don't have a way to remember where the drag state was.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as setting up your project or file to start running these tools, did you had already laid out your lot lines and your lot pads, but it looked like you had those at a 0 elevation. Did you already set your lot lines to be dynamically linked to the right of way?
You can. Currently, you would drape them on the corridor surface, or whatever your roadway surface is, and if you want to set them relative, that's perfect. The rest of the lot line would not update. You would have to rerun the lot grading tool because the lot grading functionality is not dynamic in itself. So you would have to re-swipe through the lots, but yeah, you would initially set up your A elevation to be on the lot. Now, as I mentioned, in future update coming soon, we're offering that ability to reset the A elevation as you swipe through, but it's an option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great, thanks.
That was great, Steve, Landon. Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Nobody else has any questions?
I would just add, reiterating what Landon said in the beginning, and just because Steve's done such a good job with his tools. Most everybody on here probably's seen his tools, but if you haven't, I mean, really go check them out. They're worth their weight in gold. The amount of time it saves you. And this one's amazing, by the way, Steve and Landon.
Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate that. If any of y'all want a trial license of this, just reach out. I can get you the installer and a trial license, and what you're seeing in this presentation, I can, get that over to you, and you're free to start playing around with it. It does come with this drawing that you see here. It's included in the bundle. And so you don't have to do anything to set it up. You can just operate with this exact file and start playing around with it. Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to get approval from the higher ups to get something like this, approved or installed, is that something that we can, kind of link you guys together?
Yeah, absolutely. I have those discussions all the time. Being a past CAD manager or civil designer, I know how that goes with trying to approve that. And if I have to do a presentation or whatever to the higher ups, feel free to chime me in.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as an example, I was trying to figure out how much money does this thing really save? And I was looking at this particular project. I want to say we had budgeted I don't know, let's call it $4,000. I think it was in that ballpark from the amount of man hours we were putting into it, or thought we were going to put into it. And I really think, while I said I graded it in less than 5 minutes, I was racing through to do that. But it's really, with this tool and with a clear idea of what the client's trying to accomplish inside of the pad, you can really get done with something like this and very thoroughly labeled, plotted, and begin reviewing by lunch. I mean, we had this particular project, we had a client was coming in unexpectedly at 3:00. The person called me at 1:30 and was like, I need a grading plan in an hour and a half. And it was, this size project right here. And I knocked it out with this grading tool in an hour and a half. And she had something to present to them. I mean, and I'm telling you, we're recording this. That's not how we typically operate at Seaman Whiteside. But the reality of the matter is, clients want to see preliminary work before it gets too far down the road. And this really allows you to knock out preliminarily some grading before you get too far down into refining the grades, and allows you to, allows the client to maybe change their product earlier in the life cycle of the project.
You guys have a good point there also with cut and fill balances. I run into that all the time where it's I have either too much cut or too much fill. And then I have to go through and regrade everything, which can take days sometimes to get to that next result. And then I busted the other way. Got too much cut now. So I think this would be a really great tool just to try to get an idea of where you want to be with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Landon, can you zoom in on a set of those corner lots up there, in the file's north direction? Yeah, where the lot lines aren't parallel. There was a question came through how it works where the lot lines aren't parallel. So what it's doing here is it's taking the measurement along the lot line. So it's going to find the midpoint or the midpoint of the lot line or a specified distance along the lot line from the front. From point A to set point B. So it's working as you would expect, I believe, on how those corner lots would be handled. I guess, Tom, let me know if you want to unmute and ask anything else on that.
Yeah, Steve, that does kind of answer that question. But one of the possible uses, because we don't do as much residential, so just trying to find maybe other uses for this. One thing we were talking about was doing campsites at a park. if there was a way to utilize this, because it wouldn't be, side by side by side. It's like there's a camp here, there's a, camping spots at different intervals and at different rotations. So would you be able to
Sure.
utilize something like this for that, where you basically are grading the pad side and then it's, going to do this outside of the pad and whatever, and then it's eventually going to end up grading to the surface?
Yeah, you could totally use it for that. You would just need, a rectangular pad, four-sided pad shape. One thing that wasn't mentioned in this, and I'm going to mention it now and come back and answer or respond to what you just said there, but the pad line work does need to be rectangular. It doesn't support arcs. So that's one key thing in how it's deciphering things. I don't think it's a limitation really. It's just it was just much easier to program in all the computation. By the time when you add arcs, it just really can overcomplicate it. So it may be in a future update, but it is just straight line, four cornered pad for the line work. But
So
with
like a
that
pad
said,
site, like with a pad site that was P-shaped or flag shaped,
yeah.
that would or would not work.
No, it's because when you're swiping through the lots, I have to, there's an algorithm in there that figures out, okay, this is the front, this is the side, this is the other side, this is the rear, and then it's performing each individual offset. When you add in that much more detail into it, it really, changes the math problem to comp that out. So, if your building was a P shape or something like that, you can use this tool to initially set the pad perhaps and just have a rectangular shape. And then, that would give you your overall pad area. And then, you can come back and add that feature line and maybe remove the pads that the lot grader makes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I have, Tom, I have graded this. I have graded flag shaped lots, although our municipalities like rarely ever let that happen. But so long as that the pad itself is rectangular, you can leave so inside the lot grading tool here, that's where you can select to not remove any existing PIs. And that kind of accommodates that flag shaped lot where you do maybe have a deflection. It's not just a straight lot line. That can be used. I think when you start to reiterate through that a bunch, then you would start to add too many PIs. And so those tend to be managed kind of, I think, individually. But to your campsite, I mean, you could drape all of the lot lines, in between campsites. You can make up lot lines, maybe the extents of each campsite, drape them onto the existing grade surface, and then now you're setting the pad of that campsite off of the surrounding existing grade. We've got the ability here in the tool to select the highest elevation along that lot line, or what I'm calling a lot line. And so that would work for campsites.
And to add on the P-shaped lot there, really the issue is on the reveal side, the offsetting of the pad. That's where we have to comp all that out, and that's where it gets complicated with the different shaped lots. I think if you actually did have like a flag shaped lot or a P shape or something like that, and you were just setting the pad and grading these lot lines, it should work as long as your fence line drags through only 2 points on the lot line. Because, as it's calculating this fence drag, it's finding every intersection across these feature lines. So you still have to have the same result, that odd number of lines that it's crossing. Well, technically it's an even number, but it's extracting out the pad and counting that once, if that makes sense. So it will affect how you drag through, but it should just apply one elevation to the pad once it deciphers that's the pad.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Landon.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you. I suddenly lost connection real quick there, but I managed to get back and hear those great questions. That was a lot of great information. Steve, Landon, thanks for coming out and talking to us about your tools.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us. Again, if you want to get a hold of me after the call, my email address is steve@redtransitconsultants.com, all one word, or you can go to my website and there's a support portal on the side that you can click and just shoot me a message through there. That's fine too.
Also posted a link in the chat
Oh, thank you, Tom.
for the Autodesk App Store.
Appreciate that.